Russia's defense ministry has declared a 5-hour partial ceasefire to allow residents of 2 besieged cities to evacuate. Humanitarian corridors are now open for people in Volnovakha and the strategic port city of Mariupol in southeastern Ukraine. Mariupol's mayor says the city is without water and power and is running out of food after being surrounded by Russian forces.
After days of relentless shelling here in the key port city of Mariupol, Russia has said it will stop firing and allow civilians to flee. The partial ceasefire was confirmed by the city's mayor and applies here in the nearby town of Volnovakha, which has seen heavy fighting as well. But they're far from the only areas devastated by Russian bombardment. President Vladimir Zelensky has been pleading with NATO to set up a no-fly zone to stop Russian airstrikes like this one outside Kyiv. But NATO has ruled that out. An all-out war in Europe, that's what the alliance wants to avoid, according to US Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
The only way to actually implement something like a no-fly zone is to send NATO planes into Ukrainian airspace and to shoot down Russian planes, and that could lead to a full-fledged war in Europe. President Biden has been clear that we are not going to get into a war with Russia.
As fighting enters the 10th day, the situation in Ukraine becomes more and more desperate. Casualties are mounting and over 1 million people have now fled the country. There are reports of severe food and water shortages in some cities, including Kyiv. But President Zelensky stressed on Friday night that he's still at his post in the capital. Every second day, the rumor appears that I ran from Ukraine, from Kyiv, or from my office. As you can see, I'm here. In the occupied city of Mariupol to the south, Russian soldiers hand out food. It's the second city in Ukraine said to be under the invaders' control after Kherson. With Russian forces on the move across the country and NATO ruling out intervention, people here are preparing for a long, bitter battle ahead.
Our correspondent Fanny Fashar is joining me now. She's in Chernivtsi in western Ukraine. Fanny, Russian forces will stop or have partly stopped already firing to allow humanitarian corridors out of the Ukrainian cities of Mariupol, Volnovakha. What do you know about that?
Local authorities in Mariupol have just confirmed that that humanitarian corridor will start so people can be evacuated during the day today. Now, we have to remind everyone here that Mariupol was heavily shelled during the past couple of days. People were not just spending their night in bomb shelters, but basically they were staying there for days. Also, the mayor of Mariupol, in a very emotional address, in a video address on Friday, made clear that apparently there's no electricity, no running water, so very basics of what you need are missing, are lacking right now for people. So it's very, very crucial time now to evacuate people as Ukrainian forces are expecting that regardless whether this humanitarian corridor is going to be set up, that's not going to stop Russia to shell other cities in the meantime. In fact, Russia's defense minister has just said that they're going to continue with their attacks. There is hope now, at least for the citizens of Mariupol, that at least the citizens of that city in the south, strategically located in the southern part of Ukraine, can leave Mariupol. But let's really see how that's going to turn out. There's also skepticism on the ground here. After all, after the second round of the so-called peace talks between Ukrainian and Russian delegations, ceasefire and humanitarian corridors were also promised, and we haven't seen that unfold. But now that the local authorities in Mariupol are saying they believe that's going to happen, at least hopes are increasing for the people of Mariupol.
And of course, you mentioned it already, the intensity of the fighting, of attacks is increasing. What's the situation where you are?
I'm here basically at the I would call it a transit town towards the Romanian border. We are about 50 kilometers away from Romania, and people who come here, internally displaced people from Ukraine, are trying to stay here, let's say, for a couple of hours, a couple of days before they face that next challenge, crossing the border towards Romania. Things here in this town in Chernivtsi are quite peaceful, I should say relatively peaceful, because of course we have heard the sirens blaring during the past couple of days, people going to bomb shelters here as well. There's a civilian airport nearby. Now Russia claims they're not going to attack civilian infrastructure, only military units, but of course we have seen that during the past couple of days, or in fact I should rather say for more than a week now, that civilian infrastructure has been also affected. So people here in this relatively peaceful town in the southern, western part of Ukraine are not 100% sure, obviously, just how long this town is going to remain safe.
All right, Fanny Fashar, stay safe, and thank you so much for this report. And for more, let's bring in Konstantin Eggert now. He's a Russian political analyst, and he can tell us more about the Russian perspective. Konstantin, let's first begin with this recent development, Russia ordering a ceasefire to ensure humanitarian corridors. What's behind that move? What does that mean?
Well, unfortunately, I think that behind this move is a massive assault on Mariupol. I think that this is a way for the Kremlin to say, well, you see, we made everything possible to save the civilians. Whoever didn't leave the city, well, we have nothing more to do with that. We are not to blame. As you probably see, the offensive seems to be focusing now not on taking the cities, which I think militarily is quite sane, because trying to storm even Mariupol will mean house-to-house fighting. Which inflicts huge casualties on the attacking side. But I think it's actually besieging the cities, including an important port of Mariupol, and shelling them indiscriminately. And this is really, really, I'm afraid, very bad news for the civilian population. And this seems to be the tactic now, or even the strategy of the Russian advance in Ukraine, which has been losing steam and which seems to be grounding to a halt. It will be quite difficult for the Russian forces now to continue taking more territory, taking more cities, controlling more.
But they're certainly trying to take more nuclear power plants. The US ambassador to the UN says that Russian forces are now closing in on Ukraine's second largest nuclear power plant after already seizing the largest one on Friday. What is Russia's strategy here?
Well, I am afraid there are two aims here. One is purely strategical, to control a significant part of Ukraine's energy grid and supply of energy, essentially. But the second thing is a psychological power play, which is very much in the style of Vladimir Putin. Look, I'm so crazy, I don't care if I shell nuclear power plants. So hoping that the West will rush to him and say, well, whatever you want, but just don't play this tricks on us. And I think that this may be even the main calculation in terms of psychological warfare with Ukraine and, frankly speaking, with the West. I suppose that this is one of the very few tools left in the Kremlin's psycho war arsenal, and they are using it.
All right, Konstantin Eggert, their political analyst and Russia expert. Thank you so much.